Би жаргал сайхан байна. Та юу чадхаа, юу байгаагаараа, хаа байгаа газараа хичээнгүйлэн хий. Сайн байцгаана хүнд үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр ороо манай Facto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор манай хөр Хятад улсын элчин сайд Xiao Long Wang оролцож байна.
Wan Xiao Long 1965 оны 6 дугаар сард Хэбэй мужид төрсөн. Эдийн засгийн доктор мэрэгжилтэй. 1987-оос 1988 онд бүгд найрамдах Хятад ард улсын гадаад явдлын яамны орчуулгын танхимын ажилтан. 1988-аас 1989 онд Англи улсын Кент их сургуульд мэрэгжил дээшлүүлсэн. 1989-ээс 92 онд гадаад явдлын яамны олон улсын хилцээний ажилтан аташе. 1992-аас 1995 онд Нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллага суурин төлөөлөгчийн газрын аташе 3 дугаар нарийн бичгийн дарга. 1995-аас 2000 онд гадаад явдлын яамны олон улсын хилцээний 3 дугаар нарийн бичгийн дарга, тасгийн орлогч дарга, тасгийн даргаар. 2000-аас 2007 онд гадаад явдлын яамны олон улсын хилцээний зөвлөх дэд дарга. 2007-оос 2008 онд Хэбэй мужийн Цанжоу хотын дэд дарга. 2008-аас 2011 онд бүгд найрамдах Хятад ард улсаас бүгд найрамдах Сингапур улсад суугаа элчин сайдын яамны элчин зөвлөх. 2011 оноос бүгд найрамдах Хятад ард улсаас Монгол улсад суугаа элчин сайд.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming to this program.
It's my pleasure.
As we do in our program, first of all, I would like to ask you about how you become a diplomat, when that decision came to you.
Well, I think I largely drew my inspiration for becoming a diplomat from my parents, because it so happens that I was born into a family of diplomats. Both my parents worked for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, so I grew up knowing a lot of their friends, and in the process getting to know as well what they did. And I think somehow I developed a liking for their job, and I think very early on in my childhood I made up my mind I would, when I grew up, I would do something very similar, or if not exactly the same.
You have done a school especially for diplomats?
I went to a college in Beijing called Foreign Affairs College. It's affiliated to the Foreign Ministry. It's one of the major institutions where we train our young diplomats in China. So
you were working in New York at the UN in New York, right?
Yes, that was in the early 1990s, from 1992 to 95. I worked at our mission to the United Nations.
Obviously, you have been meeting our mission there.
Well, yeah, I still remember. I had a lot of encounters with Mongolian colleagues working in your mission to the United Nations, and I still remember I overlapped for some time with one of your very outstanding ambassadors. Ambassador Erden Chulong.
Erden Chulong.
Yeah, and who later became your foreign minister.
Yes, he is. Yes.
He was a wonderful diplomat.
You became one of maybe the youngest ambassador of China.
Oh, one of them.
One of them. And you came to. You were once also a deputy mayor of Zhangzhou city.
Because all these years, I've been mostly working in the Chinese Foreign Ministry, and and over time we have put into place a system of sending our career Foreign Service officers on secondments to local governments or to state-owned enterprises as understudies. And the purpose is to get us to know our country better, so that we can represent our country better. And that was an eye-opening experience, working in Changzhou as a deputy mayor for almost 12 months. And by the way, the municipality I worked for, it has got a population of 6.9 million, with a geographical area of 14,000 square kilometers. So it's quite a large tract of land, and it's one of the biggest local economies in Hebei province, which surrounds the cities of Beijing and Tianjin. And Hebei province is the sixth biggest province in terms of the size of the economy in China. So I learned a lot from my experience there.
So it was helpful for your further representing your country, as you said.
Yeah, right.
Obviously, China is a country that you are representing. Today, the second largest economy in the world, overpassing Japan recently.
Mm-hmm.
And this economic growth, if will go in that way, is good for the world economy, which is unfortunately in sort of a second sort of crisis. They call it also double dips. What is your take? How strong Chinese economy today? Are you worried about this possible another crisis?
Well, I think everyone in the world is worried about, one way or another, to some degree, about the world economy going into a double dip or another recession. Because we have all witnessed what happened in 2007 and 2008, the damage the recession did to economies across the world, and the kind of negative impact it had on people's lives. So of course I think we're a little bit worried. But at the same time, I think because the Chinese economy has been growing robustly for over 30 years now, ever since the opening and reform process started. And I think we have laid a strong basis through the accumulation of material wealth, through the improvements we have made over the years in the institutions we have, and through, I think, the education we have tried to provide for our own people. So I think we're in a much more sound position than we used to be to deal with such crisis. But with or without, I think, with or without a double dip or a second round of crisis, I think the Chinese economy will slow down a little bit as compared to some of the previous years, because we have made it a clear target. We have set a clear target for ourselves that we should lower the rate of growth for our economy a little bit, so that we can better make the necessary adjustments or restructuring, so that we can rebalance the economy towards better growth over the long run, towards a growth that is driven more by domestic demand rather than export and investment only. So I think with or without what is happening in the global economy,
more accent is going also to the domestic market, to
its
potential.
That is, I think, to a large extent, that is already taking place. I read in the papers just a few days ago that one of the differences between, for China at least, between what we face now and what happened in 2008 is that in 2008, net export or trade surplus for China accounted for about 11% of our GDP, of the overall economy. And as things stand today, that has come down to about 3%. So it's a much smaller share of the overall economy. Meaning that we'll be in a much better position to withstand whatever impact as a result.
Because you are one
recession.
of few countries who is enjoying always this trade surplus, which is not the case of many countries, including Mongolia. The other day, some experts were saying that China is probably the key for solution of the size of crisis that Europe faces today, because this Europe, with the current crisis, they need so much liquid, need so much to bail out whole Europe. They need a lot of cash, and the only source who can provide that cash is China. What is your take on that?
Well,
there's a good chance, no opportunity to invest into European market.
Well, yes and no. Because I think for both the Americans and the Europeans, what they need to do to get themselves out of the current trouble is to get their acts together and put their own houses in order. So that's, I think, will have to happen before I think they can comfortably say to themselves that they're out of the current round of troubles.
That was
crisis. And remember when several years ago when everyone was exporting to the United States, and the United States was the big magnet for the export from other countries. There was a saying that the world economy could not fly on a single engine. And I think the same thing is true for the Chinese economy today. We're still a developing, although we're still already the second biggest economy in the world, but we're still a developing economy. And practically, the world economy just cannot fly on a single engine of the Chinese economy. That's not going to work. We have to work together on this. But although, of course, we will make our own contributions, there's no doubt about that. We'll try our best to help others.
Is it under the same concept about China cooperation or cooperation with all neighbor countries?
Well, yeah, right. So we have always followed a good neighborly policy with our neighboring countries, because this is geographically our immediate neighborhood, and whatever happens around us will have an impact on what happens in China as well. So we have a keen interest in working together with our neighboring countries, which are also our closest partners, because over the years we have built up these partnerships through concerted efforts with our neighbors. And I think these partnerships are paying off for both China and our neighbors as well.
Mongolia is one of the neighbors who has the largest, longest border line with China, over 4,700 kilometers.
Oh yeah, it's the longest land border we have with any country in the world.
Then that means in the world as well, probably U.S. and Canada maybe.
Yeah.
And we have about 14 points where we can cross the border for Mongolians and Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives, along with our growing economic relations, cross-border trade, a lot of opportunities to improve even more.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of trade, Mongolia has always negative balance or deficit with China. We have always more importing than exporting.
Well, I beg to differ on this point, because if you look at the statistics for the past years, I think overall Mongolia has a deficit with the rest of the world put together. But with China, you enjoy a surplus. You've been enjoying a surplus because you've been consistently exporting more than you import from China. So you're exporting more to China than you import from China. And I think this surplus is growing very fast. Partly, I think, attributable to the very fast growth in your mining sector. So we've been exporting a lot of coal, iron ore, and other mineral resources. Yeah, copper as well. Yeah. So, for example, last year, I think your trade, Mongolia's trade, with China, gave Mongolia a surplus of about $1 billion. So that's, I think, is where we stand in terms of the trade figures between the two countries.
We have cross borders, probably we call it backpacker trading. And we have, in particular, in between Zamingut and the Ring, we call it, Irliang, we call it.
Right.
In between them, more trade. And there are sometimes issues that people say that things go a little bit longer. The service on two sides, customs service, and but this is not this is still keep going. But there are other cross-border checks where people and all the movement is delayed. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, right, more or less. I know, because the border we share between us, what you mentioned, the 4,700 kilometers, it's one of the strongest links that have bonded our two countries together. And as you said, we have 13 or 14 checkpoints along those borders. So this is very important for the bilateral trade, particularly in border trade. And also it is important for people-to-people exchanges, because I went down to Zaminwood to see for myself the checkpoint. It was very busy. It was very crowded. So I've been told that each day hundreds of vehicles will move across the borders through that checkpoint, both ways, and that has contributed enormously to the visits people make to each other, and the volume of trade across borders. So that is marvelous. That is marvelous. But indeed, efficiency at the checkpoints is an issue. But I think through concerted efforts, we've been making constant improvements. So the processing of each traveler across the border, I think, will take now considerable less time than what it used to be. And second, as compared to what you would see for some of the border checkpoints you share with some of the other countries. So I think down the road, you have a very good point there, that we need to work together to make further improvements.
In order to increase this turnover of goods through the border, in particular in terms of coal and other mineral resources, we need certainly to have very smooth connection of a railroad system. And here we have, what we have today, the wider gauge railroad. And this is still bottleneck at the border. And the other borders where the major line of sources are there, we still talk about this railroad system. What is your take on that?
I think the transport links between the two countries will play a crucial role in the very broad and fast developing economic relationship between our two countries. Because if you look at the breakdown of the bilateral trade between us, particularly your export to China is largely mineral resources related products. So we have to rely on bulk transport systems for that trade to take place, and for it to take place smoothly and efficiently in a cost-effective manner. Now, as things stand, transport links is already a bottleneck for that trade. So it is curtailing the potential for the bilateral trade to grow as fast as it should. And down the road, I think with the exponential growth to be expected between us as a result of several strategic mines in the southern part of Mongolia going into production, the pressure on the transport system will be even greater. And I'm not an expert, but I've been advised by experts, including the representatives of the international financial institutions working in Mongolia, that the only economic option would be the construction of railroad links. That is the only option that will make sense over the long run.
Obviously.
Yeah, and for that railway, once those railway links are put into place, for them to reach the potential they're designed for, we have to have an integrated and smooth-running system, a seamless, so to speak, a seamless system between the railway systems.
Gauges,
Yeah, right, of the two countries, meaning that we'd better adopt the same gauge. And I understand Mongolia has been using the wide gauge, and in China we use what we call the international standard gauge or the narrow gauge. So we have some coordination to do, but I think it will be in the interests of both Mongolia and China, and particularly in the interests of Mongolia reaching its potential in terms of the development of your mining resources. I think adopting the international standard stage seems to make a lot of sense.
We have talked about cross-border goods over the borders. But let's talk a bit about cross-border labor. People working. As you know, Mongolia is receiving a lot Chinese labor.
Okay.
And for a particular season, even more, etc. Are they, from your perspective, are they issues that we have to talk on that? Issues to address that makes situation better?
Yeah.
I mean, because here is a very wide range opinion that Mongolians are being replaced by Chinese workers in construction, in major mines. And of course, there is a certain issue of skills, preparations. And so what kind of problems, as ambassador, you see here?
In the field of labor, this is one of the areas that we have to close very closely with each other, because as it is, there's a strong demand in Mongolia because of the strength of your economic growth. There's a strong demand for labor in general and skilled labor in particular. And from what I know, typically in a year we have about anything between 20 to 40,000 Chinese workers coming to Mongolia to work on either, mostly I think on a seasonal basis. Only very few of them would be here on a long-term basis. And a lot of these, they are conspicuous in a way and highly noticeable because they are concentrated in a few industries or sectors. For example, the construction business, as you mentioned, and some of in relation with some of the mega mining projects as well. And I think I've asked around, including the Mongolian businesses and also the Chinese businesses operational in Mongolia, and all of them have told me that if they have any choice, they would certainly hope to employ Mongolian workers, and because they would be more stable, so they can train them and plan for their career developments for the long run, and in many cases it would be relatively inexpensive to employ local Mongolian workers because the government has imposed some levies on the import of foreign workers.
Yes.
So their preference, almost without exception, is to employ local Mongolian workers if possible. But the problem is that all of them feel that there's a shortage of supply of Mongolian workers, both in absolute numbers, but also in relative terms, particularly for the workers with the necessary training,
skills,
background, and the necessary skills. So I think that's one of the challenges I think we face together, and that's one of the issues we'll have to resolve together. And at government-to-government level, the relevant government agencies in the two governments have been talking for almost 2 years now about the conclusion of an instrument, either a MOU or an agreement that would help to streamline the introduction of Chinese workers into Mongolia, how we can do it better, how we can make the import of Chinese laborers better serve the development of the Mongolian economy, and at the same time taking care of the legitimate interests of the Chinese workers. And the discussions are still ongoing.
Because, there is sometimes occasionally some misunderstanding among people. And ordinary Mongolians are worried about if we have a lot of Chinese workers or a lot of Chinese people, then where would be our identity? We would disappear. Too small nation. This sort of concern in a way exists among ordinary Mongolians. You may know. What do you think of that?
But sometimes I think it's a misunderstanding because, as I said, in a typical year we have only about 20 to 40,000 Chinese workers in Mongolia. So that's a very small number. So I think once they're here, mostly they will disappear into the sea of the local population. But I think there's a real concern there about competitiveness of the local labor force and how the local population will benefit from the process of economic growth and development. And that's a real issue, I think. And so that's why, as far as my government is concerned, as ambassador, I've been encouraging the Chinese businesses operational in Mongolia to start training programs for the local Mongolian workers so that we can, over time, give them the necessary skills to assume the posts that are currently occupied by imported workers from China, for example. And I've been encouraging them to go into partnerships, multi-party partnerships, together with the Mongolian government, together with the local Mongolian training institutions, perhaps, so that they can work together to help to provide the necessary training to the local Mongolian
That's a very
workers.
interesting point.
Yeah, and I went to one of the actually it is already happening. I went to Chobasan last week, and in Chobasan there's a local vocational training institution that is being partly funded by PetroChina, which is operational in Donald AMAS.
Yes.
So they've been working with the local government and with the local school to train local workers, and altogether they have trained more than 100
already.
Yeah, already, and 95%, over 95%, have been employed by the PetroChina, and I think they're making relatively good salaries.
PetroChina employs more Mongolians or more Chinese now?
PetroChina.
Yes, in Dornod, in the eastern
in Dornod.
province.
I think it's about half and half from what I know. I don't have exact numbers, and what I'm glad about is that the proportion of Mongolian workers in the overall workforce they employ has been increasing over the years, and they're still on the upward trajectory. So I think over time, because they have an agreement with the Mongolian governments that by a particular year they would reach the target of employing 90% of local Mongolian workers as a share of the overall workforce.
Okay. In terms of people's exchange, Mongolians freely travel to China, no visa for certain days, 28 days. Mongolians can go without China too.
Yeah.
So this will be...
They can be in China, I think, for a month.
For a month.
For a month,
So
visa-free.
Visa-free.
Yeah.
And this is one of few countries which has a visa-free regime with...
Well, it's one of the very, very few countries because Mongolia is our close neighbor, and we've enjoyed very friendly relations over the years. So I think this started way back many years ago, and I think it's the first visa exemption arrangement we've extended on such a scale, because practically it's for everyone from Mongolia.
Yes.
Yeah. So
is it the same for
it's the
Chinese?
very first. It's the very first in.
Is it the same for Chinese?
You mean Chinese
Citizens
coming to Mongolia? No,
Yes.
no.
No.
They would require to apply for a visa before coming to Mongolia.
From our embassy there?
From your embassy or your consulates in China.
Okay, why?
Well, for that, I think you have to check with your government.
Okay.
Hopefully, that's one of the issues we're discussing with your government. We're not exactly asking for reciprocal or similar visa exemption treatment for Chinese citizens coming to Mongolia. But what we have proposed is to provide better and greater facility for the Chinese citizens coming.
It is the same about RMB, which is in a way sort of one of the most convertible currency in this country. And it's one of few also among the neighbors. Rather free convertibility. Here you can go to the market and buy RMB and sell it. So what is your take on that?
Well, I think I'm a little bit surprised by the share of at least cross-border transactions done in renminbi, and I think it is still growing, which is, I think, in line with the overall trend in terms of the circulation of renminbi outside of China. It is increasingly being used in our trade with the rest of the world, and it is also increasingly used in terms of the investment relationships we have with other countries as well.
We're a little bit in front of this overall trend.
Well, I think, what is going on here in Mongolia is not that different from what you will see in some of the other neighboring countries.
I see. Well, because we have a short time, I would like to ask a couple of questions that the only person you are who can
but on the issue of renminbi, let me add another point,
okay,
which is highly relevant to Mongolia. Because remember, about 2 months ago, the governor of our central bank, People's Bank of China, Mr. Zhou Xiaochuan, came to visit Ulaanbaatar. And during his visit, the two central banks signed a currency swap agreement.
Yes.
So
quite large amount.
Right. So it's 5 billion RMB. The intent of the agreement is to provide the kind of support you would need when the circumstances arise.
Yes.
For the support for the Mongolian touring. So this is another, I think, important aspect in the strategic partnership we have established.
So that means within it's about $1 billion, close to 1 billion.
Close to $1 billion.
So we can have up to that level here
right.
RMB,
right.
And if necessary, you can convert it.
You can trigger the swap process on your own.
With US dollar.
Renminbi. So you can acquire renminbi. You can acquire renminbi and deposit the equivalent amount of turex, Mongolian turex, with the Chinese central bank.
With Chinese central bank.
And with that renminbi, you can do anything you want. So I think from what I've learned from your central bank colleagues, I think it will be extremely helpful.
It will, I think,
for you to help
cheaper transaction
maintain, to reduce transaction cost. But what is most important about this exercise is the support it will provide for the macro economic stability in Mongolia. Particularly, I think it makes more sense and it acquires more relevance given what is going on in the world economy.
Obviously, you see as ambassador, Mongolians, come sometimes to the embassy in front of that, making demonstration and certain shouting, or certain demanding, and probably you hear that. What was your reaction? What you have seen yourself, this sort of demonstration?
Overwhelming majority of Mongolian people, I believe, would support friendship and cooperation between Mongolia and China. But I do understand there are some small and isolated pockets of so to speak, unfriendliness. And sometimes this has arisen out of misunderstanding or lack of understanding about China, the Chinese people, and the nature of the relationship between our two countries. So I think what we can do together as China and Mongolia, particularly at the government level, we can create more opportunities for the two peoples to understand each other better. I think in this process, the mass media in the two countries can play a very important and useful role.
With the same talking, possible visit, I don't know whether he is coming, possible visit of Dalai Lama to Mongolia. Because you have been always reacting very sensitively, his visit to large countries, visiting, etc. So would it be any difference, or what is your take of possible visit of Dalai Lama to Mongolia?
We're opposed to Dalai Lama visiting any country that have diplomatic relationships with us.
Even he is the religious leader of that religion of that country?
I think it's because we've been explaining to our partners that Dalai Lama, he is a religious figure, but at the same time he's a political figure as well. And the raison d'etre of the so-called exile government in northern India is to seek so-called Tibetan independence. That is the only reason that that political structure exists.
Well, certainly on that we don't have any political disputes or different opinion. And in one of your last article, and you rightly mentioned that we don't have disputed areas or disagreed political issues among two countries.
Exactly.
And we don't have any border dispute problems.
No.
Everything is set.
No.
That and plus it's very mutually beneficial, as you said. Cooperation makes us to today's head of cooperation, which you call, and we call on two sides, I think, a strategic partnership.
Yeah. It's a matter of trust and confidence between the two countries. And on our part, we support political independence and territorial integrity for Mongolia. And we support your sovereignty, and we support and we respect and support the path of development you have chosen for yourselves. And we understand and support your efforts to seek greater guarantee for the security of the country, both politically and economically, through means of diplomacy. So that's, I think, what we can do on our part for Mongolia. And we're very glad that on Mongolia's part you have extended very strong support over the years to China on some of the core interests we have. For example, on the Tibetan issue, on the Taiwan issue, and you have made it very clear that you will follow a one China policy. You would consider both Taiwan and Tibet as inalienable parts of the Chinese territory.
With Taiwan, we have economic relations, some mutual trading, and certainly that's what you just talked about. The same policy, same stand on these positions, of course, makes. And Mongolians, I think, ordinary Mongolians are very happy that we have this great relationship with our large neighbor. We have another large neighbor, and we also want to tend that relations with that neighbor. And of course, we, as a small country, cannot and should not intervene into the political situation and political issues in both countries. And that's how do we see our future, as well as with the other neighbors we call also China and Russia and other countries we call also third neighbors, virtual neighbors, which I believe stand, which is good for economic development of Mongolia and good relations with our neighbor. And of course your work, your presence here and your work in this regard is very much welcome and appreciated. And I have seen your very active participation in developing in the relations of two countries. And that's great, and we would like to thank you for that job.
Yeah.
And before closing, if there is any
It's such a
questions,
privilege. Yeah.
if there is any issue you would like to convey to Mongolian audience?
Well, maybe I'll follow up with what you mentioned just now. First on Taiwan. We're okay if you have economic and people-to-people interactions with them. But what we're opposed is the development of official relationships. And so far that has not happened in the case of Mongolia. And we're glad that you have been very, I think, clear and explicit on this issue. And in terms of the, so to speak, so-called your third neighbor policy, we understand the rationale behind it, and because as far as China is concerned, we have a very open relationship with the rest of the world. We would seek friendly relations with all countries, and I think the third neighbor policy of Mongolia is not that different from the all-around and comprehensive approach we take in our external relationship. And as far as my work here is concerned, I consider it a pleasure and a privilege to be given the opportunity to represent my country in Mongolia, which is a close neighbor, a fast-growing economy, and a strong partner in many fields with China. And so people say I've come to a very interesting country at a very interesting time. I'm glad, because since my arrival I can feel first and foremost the potential of the country enjoys, first and foremost, and secondly the vitality and dynamism of the economy here. When you're out on the street in Ulaanbaatar, you can feel it. And thirdly, the overwhelmingly friendly feelings the Mongolian people cherish towards the Chinese people, and the expectations you have for cooperation with China in a way that will benefit both of our countries and both of our peoples. So I'm very glad I can be part of all this, and I'll be privileged if I can help to make a difference and and if I can make my contribution.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Growth of the relationship.
Thank you very much for the warm words. And really, during your tenure, I think we will have even more cooperation inputs.
Yeah.
So let it be.
Yeah, that's my hope as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay.